It's better to
Yeah.
have a buffer.
No, I'm totally good.
All right, I'm going to hit record as a backup here, and we can go. Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy. We have a pretty normal show tonight, but I'm really excited to get started with it because we have, the two games that we're going to talk about, one quickly and one extensively as we do, and then a lot of fun news to kind of follow up on the podcast version. Thanks for joining us on the big 550 KTRS. I have Matt Baker here with me. Matt, how's it going, man?
Great, Phil. Happy to be here with you. Happy to talk about City's upcoming road match against the Galaxy. Should be a good one. Hopefully, an exciting rematch. And it's another exciting weekend of soccer in St. Louis with the national team here in town and training at City Park. Having the match on Saturday. Just a good time.
Yeah, and you mentioned rematch here, and we have two rematches more or less to talk
Yeah.
about because there was the Sporting Kansas City match that we're going to touch on here right now. But of course, like I said, we're going to extensively cover that match coming up against LA Galaxy in LA. But Matt, let's do these little short takes we do to kind of get everyone warmed up about the previous match. Of course, check out Flyover Fallout that comes out every Monday that covers that match more extensively. But, I don't get to do that show very often. So far, I haven't. And someday I'm sure I will. But I get my 2 cents in here by doing this, which is my way of manipulating myself into the conversation here.
I love it. I would never want to steal the opportunity to recap or review a match because there's always important things, especially you figure out days later. And a week on from this, I think there are some important things to take away from this SKC match in the short term. Most notably for me, it was the defensive lapses that occurred in some of those key moments. And I felt in the first half of the Sporting Kansas City match, we did a good job overall of our shape and progressing the ball and creating some chances. Not a ton of chances, but the ones we did create, they were good to see. Things like Nugvi Thorson stretch the field and go direct to goal. It was good to see Sam Adeniran have some runs out there. But defensively, I think it was the version of Sporting Kansas City that attempted transition. It got St. Louis set up in certain ways, and then they leveraged their possession based offense to pull us out of position a little more. And you're going to mention, I think, some of the changes in the rotation of the lineup, but I was very disappointed in how it was not a defensively sound team for the full 90, especially even the first 45. There were moments where positionally we didn't seem to trust that other players would cover the positions that they were in appropriately.
Hmm.
You would see some of the fullbacks fold inside an awful lot. Marcanic and Hebert on the left and right, respectively. They folded in. They covered positions that I would have expected the center backs or the center mids to cover. And it seemed like we were giving too much respect to certain Kansas City players like Eric Tommy, who at one point garnered, I think, 6 or 7 defenders in and around him, while guys like Daniel Saloy roamed free on the wings. So things like that, where it is worrisome to me in context of the style of play that Sporting Kansas City has. And that's why it's one of my things to carry forward to the Galaxy match, because we're going to see a very possession oriented Galaxy team this weekend. And if we fall into the same trap, regardless of the rotation and the lineups and whatever happens personnel wise, I think that's where we could be in trouble.
Agree, and I'm glad you mentioned that whole like putting 3, 4, 5 guys on one opponent, because I think that plays right into what I was going to talk about, and I think you just added to it a little bit because I hadn't thought of that. Just the fact that Kansas City, it was something that I had noticed ahead of this game. Usually, what I say doesn't exactly lead to something directly. In this case, it did, so I got to mention it. And the fact that SKC is really good at turnovers, and that we've struggled against teams, especially earlier in the season, that are really good at turning the ball over. The duel percentage, I think we're going to touch on. And KC outdid us in that way. Let me pull up this stat because I'm looking up where did the so sorry, this is bad radio. I'm going to cut this out. See, I'm not seeing it now. I just saw it earlier. But Kansas City took us out on duels in this game. Duels won 48% on the City side, 65% on the, no, it's not percentage. 48 duels versus 65 on the Kansas City side. So let me start over. Kansas City got 65 duels in this game, won, and St. Louis only had 48. So I think it was a pretty clear victory for St. Louis or for Kansas City in this game. And, when we see St. Louis doubles and triples down on doubling and triple team, just isolating a player and counting on the press being so good that they're not able to get that ball out. Well, in this case, I think Kansas City was able to sneak through, and perhaps their possession style was able to win over the pressing style as well. So I don't know, Kansas City won this one. It was still kind of close in my eyes because both teams were playing the game that they wanted. I think it could have gone either way. I think there were some arguments about offsides that I think you guys probably covered pretty thoroughly. So anyway, no disappointment here. And I do think, as you said, I was going to mention, the fact that some players were coming out that weren't expected to be changed. And the fact that we're still kind of reincorporating Klaus, 3 subs at the half when we were only down 1 goal. I don't think, I don't think some of those were planned, some of them weren't. And either way, we're still working our way back into our quote first team. It'll be interesting to see how that rotates.
I would even argue that we don't know what our first team is at this point. I think at the beginning we've had iterations of what our first team looks like, and that may be a really good takeaway, because I was going to mention the fact that our team is vastly different without Löwen. It was clear that regardless of the game flow, which definitely changed after the Sam Adeniran call where he was offside and they took away our second goal, but Löwen was very intentional, very direct with his passing and his ability to move the ball and progress the ball in the second half. We didn't have that in the midfield in the first half. We had a moment of Indiana Vassilev sending the ball upfield, and he's very adept at, when he collects the ball, looking immediately high for an attacker, sprinting upfield and finding them. He's great at that, but we often miss in the midfield an ability for, whether you call it a pivot at the mid or a true box to box who can play the ball. They can carry the ball and then they can find the open man, or even just take the shot just outside of the box and try to make something happen on his own, because Löwen is so talented that he can do that. And we didn't see that individual skill in the first half. And that kind of leads to the overall discussion of our lineup. Like, we know there are some mainstays in the lineup if everyone's healthy. I would list them as the holy grail of players, the unicorn lineup that we haven't quite seen yet, of Berkey, Nilsson, Parker, Blom, Löwen, and Klaus. So you have those 6 players. That's our spine. I don't think you would find any single person that would argue that those 6 players, if we were running out our best 11, would be in there. But who fills out the other 5 is the question. You have 2 fullbacks, so you're left with 3 other players, and you can positionally and formation-wise look to any number of looks that we could give, from a 4-4-2, a 4-2-3-1, 3-4-1-2, which I've kind of liked lately. But you're seeing guys like AZ Jackson, Knut Thorsen, Jared Stroud, Rasmus Alm, Nico Gioacchini, Sam Adeniran, Indiana Vassilev, all of these guys playing themselves into this conversation. And regardless of who wins out in a best 11, quote unquote, that's, to me personally, why I don't necessarily harp as much now as I did at the beginning of the season on identifying a best 11, because whoever isn't in that lineup, like Indiana Vassilev, Jared Stroud, Knut Thorsen, if one of those guys one or more of those guys are not in the lineup to start with, I know we're going to see them in key, crucial moments of the game moments of the game where everything can change by an individual performance with fresh legs. And that's the benefit of the depth that City's been able to cultivate now that we have Thorsen on board. We have Marcanic, who's showing some really exciting things on the left side, and still having good matches from Rasmus Alm, Indiana Vassilev, and Jared Stroud. I see a lot of opportunities, and knowing what our best 11 is, I think the Galaxy match is where I'm looking for a glimpse of that, because Klaus, you would expect to go more than 45. You have Tim Parker with the potential injury we're going to talk about in a moment. But other than that, everybody's basically healthy. And you're seeing this is, and I'll mention it, this is probably one of our last remaining opportunities to get a best 11 where you don't have fixture congestion as a reason or an excuse, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's exactly that. I'm looking to see if this was a fixture congestion, lineup rotated. I think most people thought that it was a rotated lineup,
Yes,
and I think they were upset that it was rotated against Kansas City of all teams. I
agreed.
understand that frustration, but it needed to be rotated one way or another. So,
And there
um,
weren't that many players rotated, to be fair. It was just a very odd looking lineup. Like
well, it
you
just depends on how you look at it because
it
again, we
is.
don't know that starting 11. Yeah,
That's
that's
fair. Yep.
arguable.
I would also say though that while those might be, in my opinion, our six mainstays, it's pretty clear right now that at least Bradley Carnell views Kyle Hebert as a mainstay, someone who
Yeah.
has to be in the lineup. And the fact that he started against Kansas City as a right back tells me that it doesn't matter what position he's going to be in. Bradley Carnell will find a way to keep him in the lineup, and that's the level of trust that Hebert has. I think he's starting to get a little more pushback from fans than he did when Hebert debuted at left back because of the result. And it's almost poetic. Like, let's be honest. Hebert's first
Mhm.
start as a left back was against Sporting Kansas City, where we beat them 4-0. His first start at right back, we lost 2-1 against Sporting Kansas City. So there's a bookend to this that I'm curious where he goes from here as far as his position and his staying in that starting 11, but I just found that fascinating, that kind of juxtaposition between the two SKC games.
Completely agree, and it leads us into our next section here. Is it looks like perhaps there hasn't been news on Marcanic's injury, but we do have other injury news to give. So I'll just let you fill that out the way you would like to, Matt.
Yeah, the injury news that I think is going to be front and center, it starts with Tim Parker. He left the Sporting Kansas City match at halftime due to a lower body injury. He wasn't at training on Wednesday, but he was at training on Thursday, working out separately from the team, running pretty hard. But it's going to be Friday in the press conference, and then into the weekend to see how he responds. I can almost guarantee that Carnell's going to say, we hope to have him available. We hope that he will travel. We're going to run another test on Friday or Saturday before we go out to see how he responds. That kind of scenario. I would bet a lot that he's going to be listed as questionable on the player availability report this weekend, and it kind of is all going to ride on how he's probably able to pivot. It looked like an ankle injury from what we saw on
Yeah.
Instagram this week, and the fact that he was icing it up on, I think that was Monday, didn't train on the first day that City trained Wednesday, but back with the team on Thursday. Good news. Even better news is Nico Gioacchini. Shoulder injury that happened after the FC Dallas match. He was on the bench for Sporting Kansas City. I'm sorry, that happened in Orlando. Let me correct myself. Nico Gioacchini's injury was against
Mhm.
Orlando. Missed the FC Dallas match. He was on the bench for Sporting Kansas City at training on Wednesday. Things seem to be progressing well for him. The fact that he was on the bench, despite the fact that he didn't see time against Sporting Kansas City, tells me that he's available enough. And with another week of rest, I think he should be in the clear. I hope to see him off of the player availability report. You mentioned Anthony Marcanic. Do we know anything more about what's going on with him?
No, we do know that it was like a muscular calf injury is the at post game. So things might have changed since then, but I know he wasn't able to put weight on it, but I haven't seen reports about that being worse. I don't know. Do you know, has he been in training this week? If so, then I think he'll be fine.
I think he was. He wasn't a notable absence. I haven't been at training this week. I'll be there
Okay.
on Friday to be able to figure out who's in and who's out. But without Marcanic, you're looking at back to Kyle Hebert at left back,
Yeah.
almost assuredly. So regardless, if Marcanic can go, I still think it's likely that we see Kyle Hebert back in that lineup. To be quite honest, Anthony Marcanic didn't show me anything overly bad.
Right.
Especially in conjunction with Kyle Hebert at right back, that definitely masked some of the probably deficiencies he might have shown defensively, because I mentioned he did fold in quite a bit there. But, he's a guy we're going to need down the stretch.
Yeah, and just to kind of plug it, since we did it this week, Matt Pollard joined us. He's from Colorado, from
Mhm.
the Burgundy Wave, and holding the high line. And he mentioned that Anthony does not have a massive injury history, no, nothing big to mention there. But also, I kind of thought he was in as an attacking player, and
Oh, yeah.
Matt's saying that he's more of a defensive player. At least that's the way Colorado used him. So just something to watch going forward, and just give that episode a listen if you'd like to hear more about that, a little bit of trash talk on Cronky as well, of course,
Who
and
doesn't
a
want to
little
hear
bit
that?
about yeah, and a little about the Robin Fraser firing that happened literally the day we ended up doing that, out of luck. So you're listening to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. I was about to move us on, Matt, but I forgot we still have a little bit about the European transfer window being open and some possibilities there.
Yeah, we talked last week about Isak Jensen being loaned to a Danish side for the fiscal year, essentially, but until the end of the season. There's the business side talking about fiscal year, but the European transfer window is still open for a few more days. And so we're recording this on Thursday night, September 7th. It would not surprise me if certain things were in the works, or talks continue that we may have alluded to before. So if you're familiar with Flyover Footy and you've listened to us in the past few weeks, in the past month or so, you know some of the players we've talked about. Still conversations being held. So there's nothing to report as far as anything being done, and definitely no rumors that are almost complete. But I do just want to add that the transfer window is still open for players that can go outbound on transfers, on loans. So keep an eye down, an ear out, and be watching social media for any news.
Absolutely. Possible movement there. Let's move on to LA Galaxy. Let's start talking about them. Matt, you do such a good job of collating certain thoughts and facts about the team we're about to face. So I'd love to hear those now, if you will.
It's a familiar team, but at the same time, it's not. And that's kind of one of the exciting things about this upcoming weekend. So, previewing the LA Galaxy, coming into this match, St. Louis City SC is still in first place in the West with 47 points through 27 games, 27 out of 34. We have a 15-10-2 record, 15 wins, 10 losses, 2 draws, 53 goals scored, 35 goals against. That's a plus 18 goal differential. And we have a 5-7-1 away record. This is the second match of 3 in a row away. So that away record is important to note. Last week, obviously, we lost to Sporting Kansas City 2-1. Before that, we defeated FC Dallas at home 2-1. And then before that, we lost away to Orlando City 2-1. So you're looking at an ebb and a flow here since Leagues Cup. Overall, St. Louis City has 7 clean sheets on the year, and we're looking to avoid our 4th losing streak of the season. So this is one of those where whether it's a 2 or 3 game losing streak, they've typically come on the backs of injuries where we're trying to find our identity without a key player. And so you're looking to right the ship against an LA Galaxy team that themselves are in a bad place in the standings, but do have good form. So the Galaxy come into this match 13th place in the West with 29 points through 25 games. They have a 7-10-8 record with 31 goals scored, 39 goals against. That's a -8 goal differential. And they're only 4-4-3 at home. So we always talk about how MLS teams have difficult times away and a lot of stadiums are fortresses for teams at home. Well, the Galaxy have had a rough go at it at home in comparison. And they've had their own issues throughout the season that have definitely not helped their home stadium feel like a home environment, namely the boycotts that their supporter groups had with the whole Chris Klein situation and the backlash against the front office that has since smoothed over. And so that may have led into their recent run of form where in the past 3 games they're undefeated since their re-debut into MLS after Leagues Cup. Last week they drew 0-0 against Houston Dynamo. Before that, they had a 3-2 win against San Jose in the Cali Clasico. And before that, they had a 3-0 win against the Chicago Fire in their first match post-Leagues Cup. Since May 27th, Phil, the LA Galaxy are unbeaten at home. Their last loss at home was May 27th against Charlotte, a 1-0 loss. Ben Wright, our friend with Broadway Sports in Nashville, has predicted the LA Galaxy to finish with 40 points just outside of the playoff picture, which is just picking up another handful of points on the year. So their prediction, their ebb and the flow, they're not predicted to make the playoffs. So this is a team that's very much fighting for every single point down the stretch. The Galaxy overall in their last 5 matches have 3 clean sheets. So this is a team not just in the last few games since Leagues Cup, but before that, they've had a good defensive run of form. And since playing St. Louis to a 1-1 draw on June 11th, they've gone 2-3-3 combined through MLS and Leagues Cup, and then 2-0-1 in MLS play since. So they continued somewhat of a downward spiral a little bit after that. They had a mediocre run of games after St. Louis, but then they seem to find their stride. And they've been playing this entire time without Chicharito, one of the key injuries that we're going to talk about in a minute. But since the Leagues Cup break has been over and they've come back, they've actually been in a pretty good run of form.
Yeah, it's interesting to bring, I think Greg Vanney's only been there for 2 years now, and it's interesting to lose what they've lost. But the fact that they brought in a Greg Vanney and that they got a lot of more practical players when he came in, that, I think that can help right the ship a little bit better. When they lose a Chicharito, they can still be, competitive because he does push these guys to work hard. I think we're going to touch on that in the stats. Am I going to jump the gun if I mention St. Louis's schedule for the rest of the season here?
No, please do.
Because that is the scary part here is,
It is.
we're going to talk about some of the challenges in LA that they might present, may or may not. But we're looking at going to Houston away in the next week, home against LAFC, the team right behind us. So that's a big game as far as points in the race to win the West. Minnesota away has always been a challenge for St. Louis. Another Kansas City game. We know that's up for grabs, I suppose, at this point. Vancouver, you never know, but finishing the season against Seattle is not going to be easy. That's a really tough end of the year schedule. And I just say that because LA Galaxy is on the rise here, and St. Louis, this could be a regression, a negative regression for St. Louis, because these are really tough players that have come into their own at the right time, especially someone like Houston. So, interesting perspectives there, I guess.
Yeah, the rest of our schedule is probably worth a deeper dive, but every single match, even our home matches against LAFC, against Sporting Kansas City, and against Seattle Sounders, 2 of 3 playoff teams, 1 team that just beat us. There are 0 easy teams, 0 gimme games the rest of the way for St. Louis City.
And we've seen, I think throughout the season, we've seen teams at the right time for the most part. And I think it's catching up to us finally. We didn't see Messi again, we're the last team to beat Miami. Is that still true?
That's, I think they lost 1 game. They might have drew, but I've tried not to keep up with Messi as much as possible, to be quite honest. We've also haven't seen Emmanuel Reynoso from Minnesota, so there are other teams getting key players in.
True. That's happened a few times for sure. But let's talk about some of those injuries to LA Galaxy, because it's not a short list we have here.
No, and this is what I was alluding to about how we played the LA Galaxy. When we played the LA Galaxy, it was without Chicharito. He suffered his season-ending leg injury, a torn ACL in his right knee, on a non-contact play against Real Salt Lake just 4 days before we played the Galaxy. So it was heartbreaking for fans in St. Louis, to be honest, who wanted to see Chicharito play in St. Louis, but they managed to draw without him. And so he's still out. It's a loss for them, obviously, but they're missing a lot of other players. And especially recently, they've had some knocks picked up by some of their key players. And so one of the interesting stats I have in a few minutes is related to the lineup that the Galaxy have found consistency with in the last 3 games. And it's been pretty marked in who they found consistency with. But their player availability report for last week and coming into this week looks pretty bleak. They're missing Gaston Brugman in their midfield with the torn meniscus. He was injured since the St. Louis game. Martin Caceres with an avulsion fracture in his left knee. Douglas Costa, who had just returned against St. Louis last time, is expected to continue to be out with a dislocated shoulder that he suffered after the San Jose Earthquakes game about a week and a half ago. He's still within the 10 to 14 day window, and it doesn't sound like he's going to play either. You also have guys like Jalen Neal, who was questionable last week and is probably going to be questionable this week with a groin injury suffered at the end of the Gold Cup. So he's possible, but he's a big force on their defensive end that they might not have available again. And they also have a couple players out on international duty, Kelvin Leerdam and Eric Zavaleta, defenders who some of them have been regulars, some of them haven't, but they're missing depth. And that's where it's key. The big one, though, to be honest, is this past week, Lucas Caligari suffered a knee injury. I believe he came down hard against Houston last week, had to leave early in that game. Very questionable for this weekend. Talking to some of the guys who cover LA Galaxy over at News Across Galaxy, they're not confident in Caligari's ability to play this weekend. And so with fans expecting him to be out, with him not training much this week, that would be a huge loss on their defensive end, because he is one of the players who's really driven their formation and really driven their possession-based offense from the back line in the past 3 games.
Interesting. And yeah, having Jalen Neal out too, he's a pretty good passer out of the back, so that'll be interesting to watch. I'm excited about the key players for good and bad reasons. It's a fun team to talk about, and it's unbelievably disappointing in some other ways. But let's hear about, I think Dejan Joveljic is one of my favorite players in the league to follow. And I constantly forget that he's a U22 player because he looks and plays like a grown man. So he's a fun one to watch.
Yeah, and he's just he's a firecracker out there,
Yeah.
and he doesn't the we're going to talk about how the Galaxy have been moving the ball up the field and what their passing network has looked like, but he plays pretty tight and compact with the midfield, and so
Mhm.
it's an interesting look to have a player like him out there. Some of the, I mean, there's a couple of players that are worth watching and worth knowing their contributions, like Tyler Boyd, number 11, their forward, who's their leading goal scorer with 6 on the year, second in shots with 44, and shots on target with 17. Diego Fagundes is a new signing for the LA Galaxy. We're going to talk about how he arrived in just a minute, but you could really stop and start with Ricky Puig. I mean,
Yeah.
he is the engine, he is the force, he's their 6 at times, he's their 10, he's their 8. He basically drives everything about their offense. He's designated player. He has a designated player contract now. He's their number 6 midfielder. He's second in goals on the team with 5. He's tied for first in assists with 7. He leads the team in shots with 71 and with shots on target with 28. Leads the team in key passes with 46, the second highest being Mark Delgado with 33. He leads in pass attempts by more than 300, and he leads in pass or completed passes by more than 300 and pass attempts by more than 100 on the season. So in a span of 25 games, you're seeing him touch the ball 5 or more times as far as passes, more than anybody consistently every single game, and completing just a marked number more than everybody else. If we can shut him down, if we can figure out a way to stop him from progressing the ball at the field, but also from distributing the ball, that's going to be the biggest key to the game. And that's why I mentioned earlier the St. Louis deficiency against Sporting Kansas City that I saw of
Mm.
swarming a single player and leaving others open. That to me is the biggest thing to watch for, is how will we look to shut down Ricky Puig, and will it leave others open for him to facilitate to?
It'll be interesting to watch. I think early in the season, especially, I noticed with Tim Parker would just like bomb forward from the back to kind of
Mm.
break up a play, and you knew for a fact that if someone squeezed that ball past him, that it was on the game. It was going to be a shot at the very least. And over the progression of the season, I've gotten less and less worried because he just finds a way to stop every ball. And so, I almost said this earlier against Kansas City, that I thought when I left the game, I kind of forgot the order of the game. I thought, boy, it really killed us that we lost Tim Parker. But at the same time, the goals came when Tim Parker was in the game. Maybe part of that was that he was injured, but I don't know. But yeah, really good thing to watch with Puig. And, it's just like, will we be able to overcome them with the press over the possession? That's kind
Yeah.
of, yeah. And how will we shut down someone like Puig? That's kind of a game. That's a head coach and assistant coach kind of a question, isn't it?
It very much is, yeah, and so that's some of the, honestly. Let's pivot over to some of their style of play. I think that's a good lead into that, and
Yeah.
seeing what the strengths, weaknesses, and styles for the LA Galaxy are. They're typically in a 4-2-3-1 formation, sometimes a 4-1-4-1, where they're having Joveljic up front, and they kind of have just a single pivot going on. But we touched on it, Phil, that their style is possession based. They are third in the league in overall possession with averaging 55%. St. Louis, by comparison, we know doesn't like the ball and are in fact last in the league in possession with an average of 44%. But the LA Galaxy, the way that they do their possession, and this is why we touched so heavily on Sporting Kansas City to begin with, because there are direct lessons to learn. The Galaxy side maintains greater than 50% possession through their attacking midfield into the opposition half. So the first few areas on the opposition half, they maintain 50% possession or more in those areas. So they progress the ball possession based into the attacking end. They also possess the ball down both wings to the space just before the end line. So we're talking that greater than 50% possession all the way down both wings, both far wings. And that's how they get the ball in there, not unlike a Columbus or Atlanta does. And they're right up there with the most possession of those couple of teams. In terms of the sequence time and how long it takes to build up an attack, they are the absolute slowest team in terms of sequence time and the buildup of possession in
Hmm.
MLS. They are the only team to average over 4 passes per sequence in all of MLS, and they're the fourth in the league in number of 10 plus passing sequences. So we thought Kansas City, with their a couple games ago, they were setting records of 20 plus passes, multiple sequences. This Galaxy team does pretty much the exact same thing. They will consistently move the ball around the field. And we saw this against St. Louis in the first go round, where they were content with moving the ball around the pitch and trying to find spaces to be very mindful of when they're going to push the ball up the field. The interesting thing with this, though, with this slow possession based, with this methodical movement up the pitch, is they're still middle of the pack in terms of direct speed. So where they bide their time and they figure out how they want to move the ball, they make these really short, quick passes a lot. They may pass the ball around a whole lot, but they're quick in their ability to progress the ball up the field in comparison. So they're not like Sporting Kansas City in the sense that they may move the ball around and have switches for a little bit and then eventually have some overlapping runs in their wings to move the ball up here and there. When they find a way to attack, they'll attack very quickly. And that's where the tight compactness in their midfield comes in. I looked at their passing network, Phil, in the last 3 games, and they have similarities to City in the sense that they have 2 center backs that stay deep and they push their fullbacks pretty high up the field. But unlike City, they're very, very compact. The only player in the last 3 games that's really been wide in any sense has been Raheem Edwards, their left back. He's often been seen as a left wing back or even a left mid, I would describe his average position, where he's out on the left side. And you see that how that could juxtapose with a right back, a player like an Akil Watts high up the field defending. Everybody else, from Puig to Delgado, even to somebody like Joveljic, who's very much underneath next to the midfield. They're all very tight, compact, and moving the ball around so quickly, so consistently throughout the midfield that they run this little diamond or this little triangle in the midfield with their midfielders, and it's all very well connected, but it's all very compact. And that's where St. Louis has to be very careful in how their press works, because if the ball progresses to the midfield of the Galaxy and we start to try to press them too hard and get ourselves out of spacing, where we bring on 2, 3, 4 players like we were talking earlier, that's how you get yourself exposed in the back end, and they can move the ball up the wings where they do like to on both sides and find space behind you.
Absolutely. And I wish we were on a TV show. I mean, and I wish I had the skills to do 3 or 4 things at once instead of like 2, because I would put this passing network on the screen. It is so informative. It is so obvious, more so than any I think I've looked at this season, because I don't know. There's one of these. Let's see, who's that against? It looks like it's against Houston. I've never seen a right back more narrow. I mean, he's in line with the outside of the 40, the goal.
That's San Jose. Against San Jose. Yes. No, that's Lucas Caligari.
Unbelievably narrow. Yeah.
Yes, that's Lucas Caligari. And that's the kind of positioning that he can bring when he's in the game. He's often more vertical to their center backs than he is trying to create width out wide. Unlike Raheem Edwards on the left side, who will be wide for days. He'll be basically off on the bench. That's how wide he is. But when Caligari's in, he's more of a direct, almost a tucked in midfielder as opposed to a fullback or a wing back. And that's how they can. We love to talk about Bradley Carnell's asymmetrical shape for City. Well, they have somewhat of this weird, funky formation where it's almost like it's like a fishing pole, so to speak, where you're talking about Jonathan Bond, their goalkeeper, is the part you're holding. I'm not a fisherman. I don't know these terms. But when you toss the rod, you have like your right side is the fishing rod, and then everything else tucks in underneath of it. It is, and we'll post this to social media because I think it needs to be seen these past 3 games where the passing networks, just to see what we're talking about. It's very striking in how high up the field Raheem Edwards, their left back, plays in a way to stretch the field for their offense as opposed to doing anything for their defense. It's not unlike how Akil Watts is employed at times, but it's just so overt in what they're doing with him.
Yeah, it's clearly meant to put defenses off balance. And I think it benefits St. Louis in that I think they like those clumps. It might hurt them in that it might create more opportunities for them to escape some of those outnumbering, charging defenders that St. Louis does when they press. But at the same time, I think it'll help them that they're so compact, because St. Louis likes to keep their back 4 pretty compressed in the pretty narrow in defense. But also, I think this is just made for there to be someone to miss and for them to finally get an unbalanced, outnumbered City in some way. And once they find that 3 versus 2 or 2 versus 1 in any part of the field, that's where I think They look for it, they pass it around until they find it, and then they go direct the second they find it, which would back up everything you just said as far as stats and things. So that was really fun to kind of see those things combined. The last stats I wanted to throw out at you, because Matt laid out how like Sporting Kansas City this team is. And again, another stat that lined up with Kansas City is that they are first in duel percentage, and that's even better than Kansas City. And I think we were saying that, they may or may not be as good at possession compared to Kansas City. Well, they're better duelers, and in my opinion, that's what I think St. Louis lost in that last game more than anything else. And so that's something to watch: is can St. Louis weather the storm? Can they win those pressing moments, or will LA Galaxy escape through better dueling? This is that practicality that Greg Vanney has brought to the Galaxy. It's not winning the league or anything, but I do think it could win a game like this. So
Yeah, and they're particularly strong on duels on the ground. I think that's one of the big
okay,
keys. And the battles that we're going to see in the midfield are really going to highlight that. When you were talking, Phil, about our back line and some of the overloads that the Galaxy might be able to employ on us, I have
overloads. I could not think of that word. I'm so sorry.
I have flashbacks to scenarios where City fans know these all too well. Well, you'll have one of our center backs will step up a little too high, and then all of a sudden the second center back is caught in that 2v1 type of scenario where that's a transition defense that I don't particularly like for St. Louis, because that's how so many opportunities have presented themselves against us. Tim Parker will step up, Josh Arrow will be stuck tracking back if it's a turnover or if he doesn't regain possession or something. And when you have the midfield and even the forwards of Boyd and Joveljic so tightly compact in a space where I would argue it is one zone of the field that has 5 players with their average passing position. If you have that occur and you're able to beat a high line at the midfield area, then bad things can happen. And whether it comes from Raheem Edwards out left, sending in service, or whether it just comes from a Ricky Puig build to Boyd or Joveljic, I don't like the potential matchup that creates to our center backs and in the midfield. I see Jabulu Balom as being the key to all of this, because his average position is pinpoint in between all of these players. And so
Yes.
how he goes in this game, what he's able to do to disrupt this exact passing network that we're talking about, is going to play such a huge factor in our ability to not just try to score goals and get the ball, but also to remain even and to prevent everything that they build through the middle with.
I hope that's true. I hope he keeps really busy with defensive work. I hope he gets to kind of feel comfortable in his game and gain confidence, because I do still think he's been off a little bit. And, I think Leuven's going to be next to him unless we play a diamond formation. But if Leuven's next to him, I hope he doesn't get pinned back. I think that's something to watch for. I don't think he will. I think that's why we have Hebert kind of staying back all the time, to let Leuven go forward no matter the situation. But that's just something I think I would watch for as well.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have more keys to the game here that we can do before was that it? Should we do our predictions here?
Yeah, I mean, some of the keys that we didn't talk about are I think we need to have successful builds and counters from our deep positions, because we know, and this is not unlike what happened in Sporting Kansas City. I just want to see more consistency to it. I want to see more of it, and it's the same type where you're having possession based team you're facing, and you're going to be caught in some of those deep positions regularly. I mean, it's just by design, where St. Louis wants to counterattack. St. Louis wants to invite teams to possess, turn the ball over, and then we can counter. The more success we have at just pushing the ball up the field, the better we'll be. And whether it ends in a shot or whether it ends in a shot on target, that's almost secondary, because if we can have the volume of that, of moving the ball up the field in counterattack manners, I think we're going to be successful eventually. And by doing that, I think we need to create overloads ourselves, right? Like, so we talk about the push points between Gioacchini or Klaus initiating them, and then our other midfielders assisting. Well, I see a very big opportunity for the ball to be won in the midfield, even the defensive midfield of St. Louis City's, and then progressed high into where we can have numbers very quickly. We just talked about how Lucas Caligari likes to be very high up on the field, and the Galaxy do have 2 center backs that stay deep, and everybody else does something a little higher up on the field. That's an opportunity that St. Louis City hasn't really seen too often. And I think it's going to be a really good
Hmm.
opportunity if they invite the ball deep enough into their own zone to do something with it.
Great. Well, it's that time of the show. I think we're going to give some proposed lineups here, and then perhaps predictions of the score. This is one of my favorite parts of the show. So let's start with you, Matt.
Yeah, but whether you want to say it's by design or not, I didn't write one down. So these are going to be entirely off the cuff. And I think I'm going to end up talking myself into certain things that we've said throughout this show. And that's one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
I love thinking about things new and different ways as we're talking about them. And so I'm going to go with this is the assumption Parker is returning. And if he doesn't, I think it'd be Parker for Yarrow. Kind of that's an easy sub. But I'll go Berkey, Hebert at left back, Joachim Nilsson, Tim Parker, and Akil Watts as our backline, Jabulu Blom, Edu Leuven in the midfield. And then the more I was talking, I was going to go a 4-2-3-1, but I actually think I'm going to go with a diamond. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to have Leuven as our 10. So Blom is the 6, Leuven is the 10. I'm going to say Stroud and Vasilev on the wings, on the left mid and the right mid respectively. And then our two attackers will be Klaus and Thorson.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a fun one. Fun one.
I dig it. I was debating Thorson or Alm or a Deneron.
Mm-hmm.
Or Joachini. That's the wealth of attack that we have now. But I don't know. I don't know if it's because we're going to give Joachini another game to rest or because I felt like Thorson had a strong game against Sporting Kansas City, but I like the way he could feature there on the left side.
Yeah, agree. I don't care for Leuven at the 10. I've been pretty vocal in our DMs about that. I think I like him deeper. I just think he's better there. And for some reason, Aziel Jackson at the 10, he doesn't have to score. He doesn't have to assist, but just by disrupting everything and coming back and defending, he does a serviceable job there and one that seems to be working for the team. So I'll do for now 4-2-3-1 with the only difference is Aziel Jackson at the 10, Klaus up top. I think he starts this one. And I want to go back to Alm and Stroud for this game because I do think they're going to just be terriers throughout this game and just nip at the Galaxy players the entire time. I think the high turnovers are going to be very valuable against a team like this. And so I want to see that happen. I think Thor is, for me, more of someone we want to bring in when the defense is compact. We got to unlock them. I love seeing him in that position. I think he's won a game for us already since he's been here in that kind of play. I didn't like how he played in Sporting Kansas City personally. I don't think he was the right tool for the game, I guess, is what I'm saying. I wouldn't mind seeing Joachini and Klaus up top and just pulling Aziel Jackson and just going for that. And it's just part of that conversation of what is our starting 11. We might want to start figuring that out now. If Bradley Carnell thinks that it's Klaus and Joachini in the playoffs, we better start practicing that again now and getting used to it. If not, the mainstay is Aziel and I think Klaus through the end of the season, just watching athleticism and health and injuries. But that's what I would go through the rest of the season and for tomorrow night as well, or Saturday night as well.
And I know everybody's listening to us on the Big 550 KTRS, but tune into the wind down on our full podcast episode because we will be touching on exactly what Phil just said. I have some thoughts and I'm saving them for our podcast. So tune into that if you can.
Lovely. All right. Predictions real quick and we're out. What do you think?
I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw.
I actually am feeling strong. I'm going to say 3-0. I want a clean sheet in this one, even if it's a 2-0 win. But I think we get back to playing more naturally, our kind of style. I think we're at home, which we demolished Sporting Kansas City at home. So I think we do the same to LA Galaxy. Let's see. Oh, no, we're away. I'm so sorry. It's away. I'm changing everything. I'm so sorry. I was thinking it was September 30th. No, I'm with you. I'm going to go draw. Sorry. 1-1 draw.
Which I would take. I mean, they stole 2 points from us. I think a point away is always good in MLS, and that'll help further cement our position. In this playoff push. A draw away is nothing to bat an eye at.
Please forgive my scatterbrainness. It's not the first. It won't be the last. So that's it from us. Again, Flyover Footy. We're on the Big 550 KTRS. Thanks so much for joining us. Please check out our podcast if you're enjoying this. If you'd like an extended episode, we got multiple episodes throughout the week, and this episode will be longer if you check it out there. So please do. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye-bye.
Go City.
Dude, that nap affected me bad. I've never been so foggy. I did my research, which usually makes me good. It was the nap. Thanks for covering me more than once in that episode.
Very good. I made 2 notes at the 5-minute mark and at the 44-minute mark. You may want to
Thank
do
you.
an edit. The 5 was the
I marked it down as well.
okay.
That's going to be cutting like 30 seconds.
Yeah. Is what
It
it
was
is.
long. I couldn't
Let's
find the stat. I moved away from. I had it bookmarked and then I moved away from it. So
all good. I've had that happen plenty of times, and
Yeah.
my brain farts are very I'm very self-aware about them. Let's start the wind down by what was the thing right at the very end? I want to pick up on what you had just said. Shoot.
Something about getting our lineup in row, right? And
Yes, let's pick up on that because
cool.
fixture congestion is going to be an issue, and then I want to talk about City 2, and it looks like we have some fun questions. One of
Yeah.
them is about City 2, so I think it was Mark had
Ooh.
asked about that, so I want to lead with that.
And Anthony Olivernia. I love that Boyd comment. I can't wait to read that one. All right,
Yeah,
we'll be right back, everyone.
Yep, be right back. So glad that you asked about City 2 and Salio because that is something. Parker and Nilsson couldn't agree more. I don't know. LA Galaxy's pitch. That's a good question. Is LA Galaxy's pitch longer than ours or wider? Community health. I don't think so. 120 by 75. Says it's the same. 120 by 75.
Okay.
Oh, we have a host of questions to get to. These are going to be fun.
Good. I'm gonna pull up. Pull up Twitter, and then we'll just do questions and then have fun.
You let me know when you're going to intro us in, and I'll start us off.
Okay, only one Twitter question, but we've got lots of other ones. So, and recording. Everyone, welcome back to the wind down. It's begun.
Cheers.
Cheers.
You know, what are you drinking there?
I've been part of my job is rehabbing apartments. I'm a plumber, but I worked all day yesterday in black mold and I didn't wear a mask like an idiot. So I feel like crap today. And so whiskey on the throat kind of sounded nice. It's a bit sore.
This is Phil Uncensored here.
Yeah, and my asthma has been pretty bad. So I made a Manhattan on this like vintage glass I bought recently.
Good for you.
Yeah. But what do you have? What do you have?
Oh, I just went back to the well. It's another Urban Chestnut.
I got to get that.
The
I had another Oktoberfest. I won't say who because it is local. It's not as good as Urban Chestnut.
Urban Chestnut had their. I wasn't able to go tonight when we were recording this, but they had because I was coaching my kids' soccer team for the first or second practice, and Urban Chestnut had like a pre-launch for their Oktoberfest, which is coming up. I'm very excited. It's one of my favorite events.
This is borderline what we talk about before and after podcast. I want to ask you about that coaching experience, but I think we should get to these questions first.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that at the end. It was actually a really good night, so I was kind of riding a high. So
Awesome.
yeah. But before we do the questions, real quick, because
Mm,
I want to get to the comment you left off with on the radio portion, which was about our best 11. And there was a question that was posed to multiple podcasts on Twitter today about do we see Carnell running out our best 11 on Sunday against the Galaxy? And that kind of led into like, what is our best 11? And so there's a lot of conversations about individual players and formations and all the things like that. The interesting thing that I had looking at the rest of the schedule, and you touched on it earlier in the recording, is it's a difficult schedule, yes, but it's not just difficult in the teams that we play, it's difficult in the days in which we play them. And so we just finished a stretch of 3 games in 8 days, and we saw rotation as a result.
mhm,
We have the Galaxy Sunday. We have Houston Dynamo the following Saturday, but that Houston Dynamo game starts another 3 games in 8 days.
mhm.
So we have the Dynamo on a Saturday, LAFC on a Wednesday, Minnesota United on the following Saturday from that. Then we have a week-long break until Sporting Kansas City. But then we just have another Wednesday game after that against Vancouver. And then we have a week and a half break, and it's the Seattle Sounders. It's a messed up schedule as far as regularity goes the rest of the way. And so all of that comes back to I don't know what our best 11 is right now. I don't even know if Carnell knows or even cares to know what a best 11 is, quote unquote, or if he's
Hmm.
playing matchups, playing form, playing the hot hand like he often says he does. But to me, I really only see maybe 3 games left where we could truly see a best 11, quote unquote, with no consideration for fixture congestion or rotation because of that. And it's going to be the Galaxy match this Sunday. It's going to be the Sporting Kansas City match on September 30th, and it's
Mhm.
going to be the Seattle Sounders match on Decision Day, the last game of the season. And it's because we have the 3 games in 8 days, starting with Houston. So whoever we roll out against Houston Dynamo, we have to have considerations for who's going to play midweek against LAFC. And then the same thing cascades for considerations for Minnesota away. Will home and away form play into that? You bet it will. It always does. Same with the needing to rest some legs. So you're going to see consistent rotations there, here and there throughout the lineup. Sporting Kansas City, we have a week break. And then I think that game is going to be focused because A, it's Sporting Kansas City, B, it's at home. We have a week break after the Minnesota United match. And so Vancouver may be maybe a rotated lineup, depending on where we are in the standings, what we need. But that's not that many 3 matches left where we don't have really fixture congestion or rotation to worry about to see a lineup. It all starts with the LA Galaxy, and that's why I'm very excited to see what we roll out with them.
Random thought as you were saying that, you know, set pieces have been huge for St. Louis, and I was so excited to get Nilsson and Parker on the field at the same time. But with the injury and with the birth of his child, I think they've only
Mm,
been together for maybe a half. Is that true?
yeah, yeah. Nilsson has started 2 matches,
Yeah.
Orlando and Sporting Kansas City,
Hmm.
and yeah, Parker was
So,
out against Orlando because of the birth of his child.
hmm
It's not a whole lot of time, and that kind of goes to the point that I was making about our core 6 or our spine of 6. So one or more of those players has been out at some point to where we haven't been able to see them, and that's been really unfortunate. And in the chat, Mark had mentioned only a few positions are up for debate, and I do think it's those 5 positions, but
hmm.
they're important positions because those have driven a lot of the conversations in fandom. Like people constantly talk about Jared Stroud. He's a very polarizing figure
Yes, he
in the
is.
online fan base.
Yeah.
Same thing with Kyle Hebert at this point. As far as people wanted to see Anthony Marcano get an opportunity, unfortunately, he got the opportunity while Hebert moved to right back and didn't do himself any favors how he looked. Akil Watts, you can make an easy argument that he's our right back through and through at this point. And where do you our attack is quite literally any man can fill in at any number of
Yes.
positions. Like I mentioned how I think I would like to see Thorson and Klaus start together against the Galaxy. But at the same time, I really wouldn't mind at all, and I would enjoy seeing Klaus and Adeniran, Klaus and Alm,
Yeah.
Klaus and Joaquini, or having Thorson drop back into the left mid, or a formation that might look, and this is something I touched on a Fallout with Santi, is Rasmus Alm as a right wing back. Think about that one for a minute, because
Yeah.
Alm has typically been a right mid, right winger type of a player, second striker. Does that remind you at all of anybody that might be familiar with, maybe on a U.S. men's national team level, compared to what he does for club and country?
Yeah.
Maybe a Timothy Weah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't
Exactly.
mind if Alm fell into that kind of a role for St. Louis City, which opens up a whole lot of opportunities for a three center back look.
Even someone who reminds me of Alm has always reminded me of Alm. I think mainly because of their stature, the way they play, and like even the way they look. Is Paul Areola is exactly the same kind of player, and he's played some right wing back for club and country as well.
Yeah.
But I want to challenge everyone's thinking on what is our starting 11, what what positions are up for grabs. I don't like to for St. Louis, I don't think of it that way. I don't blame anyone. I'm not saying anyone is bad for thinking that way, but St. Louis is different. They're a pressing team. They're an athletic team. They're a team that will get worn down if they don't rotate. And I think how often do you see the same pair of wingers play 2 games in a row with St. Louis since the beginning of the season? It rarely happens unless it's necessary because of injury or whatever. And so that's a position that is just heavily rotated in general. When Klaus isn't a dead-on starter, you nailed it. It could be Sam, it could be Joe Aquini. You just never know. It could be Alm, for goodness sake. So, and
Yeah.
now we got Thor even in the mix. And so I think now that we have a little more depth, now that we know who's kind of in the top roster and who's not, I think Bradley has a lot of tools that he's able to plug in based on our opponents. I'm looking at Minnesota and I'm thinking about like the way Sam Adeniran plays. I know he's a big guy. I know he had a lot of headers when he came back to us. So that's really good in a bunkered team, but he's way better in transition. And so if we think we're going to get a lot of transition moments, I think he's going to be a really good player. I think Stroud and Alm are especially good for that. I mentioned Nukvi is going to be someone we might want to play against, someone like Minnesota, who's going to sit back and just wait for us to make mistakes and then capitalize. So, I think in Marcanic, you look at where we put Hebert, right or left side, which attacking player, fullback are we going to put in? That's a plug and play position as well. The 10, Ostrak, Leuven, even Vasilev has been plugged in there. It's just really cool. We'll be able to watch like the thoughts that Bradley and his staff, even Lutz, thoughts they have on who should play where and why, and the rotation in lots of games coming up, as you said, Matt. So I'm excited to see it. And again, I think that spine is there, Matt. I think you're dead on with that, but I don't think we should see like we have a best 11 for the rest of the season, even through the playoffs. I think it's going to be plug and play and who's going to be the right guy for the situation.
And plugging and playing consists of AZ or Ostrak at the 10. Vasilev was very successful at the 10 earlier this year, so can't count him out of that conversation. And so you're able to have some of these midweek matches where people will call them rotated lineups, but a rotated lineup that consists of Tomas Ostrak in the starting 11. Remember where we were this time last year thinking, oh my God, I can't wait till Ostrak is out on the field for us. He's signed to a big contract. Like he's one of our highest paid players on the team.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's just one of those guys who everybody keeps getting an opportunity and running with it. And he hasn't quite found that footing yet. And so he's been more of the guy who comes in at 70 minutes and is able to run all over the field against people and create chances because he does that consistently when he enters the game. He's kind of carved a niche out for himself in the later minutes of the game. But that's the rotation we talk about. It's bringing in Thorson. It's bringing in Ostrak. It's bringing in Adeniran or Alm. Like this is quality depth. So that's why I defend the rotated lineup so fervently online. I see all of those guys come in who you wouldn't necessarily name them as a regular starter if you were going to, but the quality and the level of skill that they all possess and the success that every single one of them have had at various points throughout this year points to, it doesn't matter if you call it rotated or not, they've had success and they will continue to have success in this system.
Absolutely. So I think that's a cool way to kind of view the rest of the season, and it's really fun. It's cool that we have a team that rotates a lot. I like it. I prefer it, to be honest with you. I love seeing these guys that in a lot of teams wouldn't see the field, and they're getting 500 minutes or more this season. That's so much fun. Matt, I want you to choose the first question because I think you've read over these a little better, and so I'm kind of curious which one you want to go with first.
I want to start with Celio Pompeu and City 2.
Yes, this is
That
a
seems to
fun
be
question.
a pretty hot topic here lately also because Celio is a player who had found his way to the first team quite consistently in the midway points of this year. There was a span of games where he was starting pretty regularly when Klaus was out. Definitely found himself subbing into the lineup regularly. But now he's featured for City 2 in the past few games. And City 2 has had a lot of success recently in MLS Next Pro, but there's been a lot of, I guess, confusion around why Celio has been dropped from the first team to be down with the second team. And the first thing that came to my mind, honestly, is are we shopping Celio? Because he's the third player, I would argue, that was moved down to City 2 somewhat regularly here recently. The first player that we noticed was Selmer Pedro. And Selmer Pedro was a player that had transfer rumors or loan rumors attached to his name for the past month or so. We haven't been able to move him. And he is one of the players that I was alluding to keeping an eye on just because his name has been out there as an option. He's our third, maybe even, third left back at least, maybe even our fourth left back at this point after Hebert, Marcanic, Nelson, and now Pedro. So coming in with the expectations that we had of our first signing, you expect him to slide in as a starting left back. Now he's fallen to fourth on the depth chart. We just signed Marcanic. The writing seems on the wall that he needs a move to see more playing time at a consistently high level. And so Pedro we saw with City 2. The next player we saw with City 2 was Isak Jensen. Jensen started almost same scenario as Celio Pompeu, where Jensen had a span of games where he's kind of a sub. He sees some minutes with City, but he never really cracks the consistent starting 11. And then all of a sudden, during the transfer window, he's down with City 2. And then suddenly he finds himself loaned out to a Danish side for the next year. And now Celio Pompeu finds himself with City 2 as well, almost concurrently with that timeline. I zero rumors that I know of. This is pure speculation, 100% speculation, just based on that kind of a trend. But I wonder if the consistent playing time that Celio is seeing down with City 2 is because they're shopping him or they're letting him showcase himself for potential suitors, whether it's for the rest of the calendar year or the rest of the club calendar year until next June. I don't know. That's just the first thought that came to my mind when people are talking about why is Celio down with City 2? Why not Tomas Ostrak or why other random names of players who might be playing the bench or not seeing minutes? Why not? We've seen Bartlett down there once or twice, but why not these other players? Celio seems like he's one of our more exciting players who's had a lot of success. And I'm not going to argue with that because he has been extremely exciting, extremely successful at stretching the field and very physical with the ball. He's one of our best pressing attackers. I think it was Justin Horniker had a stat that he is one of the top 5 in like presses per 90 or something in MLS. It's a crazy stat at his level. And
I
so
remember seeing that now.
Yeah, that type of a player where I think, okay, that's why we might be seeing him down with City 2 recently. And a timely comment from Mark in chat is loan season over? Loan season for MLS is over in the sense that you can't bring players in. The transfer window is closed, but the transfer window in certain European countries is still open. And so that's what I'm talking about. There's a few countries. Turkey is one of them, I know, and there's a handful of other countries whose transfer deadlines aren't for another few days, I believe. So I mean, this is coming up quickly. So by next week, this entire conversation may be outdated or shift to something else, depending on what we see Celio start to do again. I just wonder if that is an overarching factor in why we're seeing him in particular with so many minutes with City 2 now.
Yeah, and I actually am curious. Like, I wonder if they shopped everybody. I do think Jensen makes the most sense to be shopped, especially somewhere back to Denmark, his homeland, where he's comfortable, a league that I think he's very capable of thriving in. And he wasn't, while he looked good with City 2, he wasn't productive, and numbers are everything when it comes to that. because I do think perhaps Johnny Klein might have put himself higher than him on the depth chart, depending, no matter what his standing is in the roster officially.
Yeah.
But I think now that Jensen is gone, I'd like to just present another option in that they needed to get rid of one attacker because these guys can't just sit the bench.
Yeah.
Celio can't retain that level of talent and quality if he's not able to keep playing. And so one or the other probably needed to go, and the other one was going to take that City 2 regular playing time spot. So I think that's more likely it. I think if a winger went down, I think Celio would be the first to plug it, plug that hole. Thorson coming in, even it might have forced this necessity for a loan. So I think Celio. I want to say too that I think it'd be good for him to be shopped. We talked about City 2 players that maybe should be loaned to a better team, like a USL Championship team at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
Celio should have been in that conversation, right? Because he didn't look incredible in the first City 2 game. The second City 2 game, he looked like a ringer. He had 2 assists in that game, I think. And so it looked like he was doing whatever the heck he wanted on that field. So that level's a little too low for him, in my opinion. He should help that team into the playoffs and on, hopefully. But, I think he would be better served as a player if he's not needed in the playoffs to go on loan somewhere else, even early next year. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and that's, like I said, next week is probably going to shift some things. So if we see Celio with City 2 down the stretch, that may mean something entirely different than seeing Celio and Isak Jensen and Selmer Pedro with City 2 over the past month. Because I firmly believe that the past month or so has been a showcase time for certain players. Isak Jensen, obviously. Selmer Pedro, wholeheartedly believe. And I do think that may be a reason why we're seeing Pedro see some time at center back. Like, there's no coincidences, especially this big in soccer. And so you've got a transfer window that's open. You have potential suitors for Selmer Pedro, and then all of a sudden he starts playing center back. Like, come on. That's a little too on the nose for what could be going on.
Yeah.
And again, zero knowledge of any kind of happenings or close to anything. This is pure speculation, but it just seems like that was a very sudden move for Pedro to start playing center back the past couple of games for City 2. And it seems like there's more to that story than just we need him to fill in at center back when you've got other center backs available on the roster.
Yeah, we have too many center backs, right? You know, like John Bell probably should be
John Bell, Lucas Bartlett,
exactly.
No.
They're the Celios of the defensive side, right? So a couple of things. I didn't see your comment there, Chris Gebhardt on YouTube saying, I didn't see this when I said it earlier, but Parker Nilsson have played one half together. So I thought
this is what you were building off of, because he spot on with that.
So yeah, maybe they need to build the relationship. Maybe that's another thing about the Sporting Kansas City game. So that is a good point. I'm mostly thinking about, I would love one or both of them to I would love to see both of them get a goal down the stretch. Not just one of them, both of them get a set piece goal. Yeah. Both of them being on the field at the same time for set pieces has to be something they're looking forward to in the future. There's a lot of talk about this extra time, I guess, is starting to, I liked that Mark Olivernia said that extra time thinks Boyd is going to walk all over us. I didn't hear it, so I don't know if that's how it was said. But Boyd is kind of my favorite punching bag because the guy looks good and then he just does not finish. Matt, I smiled as you listed the stats about Tyler Boyd, like the amount of shots he has, and he's got 6 goals, and how many of them were on goal. Boy, I mean, he's not a guy that scares me. He looks scary until he shoots, and I said that about a few players actually this year that have made me eat my word. So I hope that doesn't happen here. But
I mean, the last time we played was the match after Chicharito went out and Tyler Boyd had 0 shots. He just wasn't a factor in their offense against us. So I don't know where they're coming out of. He's suddenly going to be a huge factor or be a game changer, other than the fact that he may have had success recently against other teams. I just don't like, he's their leading goal scorer with 6 goals. That's not noteworthy. Like, Joao Klaus has 5 goals and he hasn't played in 2 years. Like, I mean, like, this to me is just another reason. It's another excuse to make good on previously estimated standings and positions. Like, there is still that narrative that St. Louis shouldn't be doing what they're doing. And part of it is very much so some pundits who are still staking claim to their previous positions of St. Louis isn't for real. If you've ever been on Twitter after a big city win or a big city loss, follow our friend Manuel Veth, follow Matthew Doyle. One of them will be making a comment one way or the other to back up previously made statements. Manu's a very ardent supporter of what Lutz and St. Louis is building. He's made so many claims of this style is something MLS hasn't seen and it's working. And every time St. Louis wins, it's being backed up. And Doyle doesn't miss a beat. And for some reason, his face just popped up on FBref while I'm looking up here. It's like he doesn't miss a beat when he's talking about he's taking opportunity to take shots at City. And it's because he staked such a claim preseason to them finishing poorly. He had articles on MLSsoccer.com. I mean, he took his shot as a writer and an analyst should, a national person who doesn't follow every single club boots to the ground. He took his shot. He was wrong. And on the glimpses in which he has the opportunity to be right, like a St. Louis loss, or maybe if you're looking at highlights and you don't see anything redeeming about St. Louis, he'll take that as an opportunity. It's frustrating from a local perspective to continuously have those shots taken when you're not having similar shots taken, I think, in regularity about LAFC or the Seattle Sounders or the New England Revolution on the opposite conference. But I think it still goes back to the fact that people are looking for St. Louis to stumble and they're waiting for it to happen so that they could say, see, I told you so.
Yep. Yeah, I think they're going to be hoping for a down second year as well, just to hope that it buys them some kind of.
I've already seen it. People are already saying, just wait until they're the next Austin.
This is going to be real disjointed. I'm being a bad host here, but I want to take it back to City too. I've noticed this too, and I'm surprised we haven't talked about it yet. The fact that Miguel Perez hasn't seen much senior team time recently since kind of everybody got healthy, basically. And even his City 2 minutes are starting to dwindle just a little bit. That's no big deal to me, but what do you think, Matt?
Yeah, that was one that kind of caught me by surprise. I think it's not just that I haven't been paying attention to what he's doing with City 2, but City 2 has been winning so regularly. And so I don't know if that's a case where you have the priorities of trying to get guys minutes that are you're wanting to send out, the consistency you want to see from guys like Max Schneider, who has been the consistent person, Max Schneider and Michael Wenzel. They've played an overwhelming amount of the most minutes for City 2. And that's kind of where Miggy slots in, right, in that central midfield where Max's position is. And so you do have this congested area that I think it's more so they have a different plan for Miggy, like something specific to Miggy, as opposed to he doesn't fit into a lineup that is winning. So they prioritize individual player reasoning for City 2. That's pretty obvious. They'll give minutes to like Tyson Pierce at key moments in his development. They've spotlighted Caden Glover, Johnny Klein, Faisal Batachi. They've seen significant minutes, and I think all of those players have upward trajectories with City. You have Isak Jensen, you have Selmer Pedro. You don't have Owen O'Malley, and you don't have Miggy Perez lately. And Owen O'Malley's had his own issues throughout the season, which kind of make me think, again, with no inside information on this comment, that he's not in the long-term plans for City. But Miggy Perez, I just think there's something different happening with him, whether he has something going on in his life that he's focusing something else for the moment, or if they're maybe looking at him on the UPSL level for the time being to maybe readjust his trajectory. So the people like to comment that Miggy Perez wasn't ready for the amount of minutes he received for City. I've seen that comment a lot online, is that he was there because we were injured and yada yada. And then I wonder if it's not necessarily that, but it's that there's an opportunity that the staff has seen for him to see more meaningful minutes elsewhere. And I do want to look at the UPSL schedule whenever I get a chance to see if he may be, or when it comes out, because I don't know if it's out yet, to see if he may be on that roster as well. Because that's like, if nobody's familiar with the overall structure of City and their academy, you've got obviously the first team, you've got City 2 and MLS Next Pro. But last year they rolled out the UPSL side, which is essentially a U23 team, I think. Might be U21, but I think it's a U23 team. There's no age restriction, but that's essentially what it is.
Mhm.
It's the gap. It's bridging the gap between the U17s at the academy and City 2. So you have the UPSL side. A lot of guys who graduated from the academy, instead of getting signed with City 2, they moved there first. And so they were spotlighted a lot heavier there. It's almost an academy pipeline to get to that point and then see who can be signed for City 2. Wouldn't
Mhm.
surprise me if Miggy Perez saw some minutes there. But otherwise, I don't know. Very interested to see where he ends up for the rest of the season.
Yeah, maybe a good question we can fit in toward the end of the season, depending on what happens in the playoffs. But I want to fit in right there that Nolan McGuire has, Rivas has been such a mainstay, reliable right back in the absence of O'Malley. And the fact that Nolan McGuire has been able to, I think they plugged him in once or twice to give him a shot, and I think he's kept it. It's very admirable. And I think he's looked very good in that position. Also reliable. And I wanted to check his age. He is 18. His birthday was June 26th. So he's 18 now. I'm not sure what his plans are next year, but it's really cool that he got so much time with City 2 and that we're going to be able to get to see him play and do so well if he's headed to college. I mean, I need to look that up tomorrow, but he's been good. So
I'm still excited that that's a consistent pipeline City 2 is seeing,
yeah.
is the academy guys and their continued shot. We're starting to see the names stack up for who's taking advantage of those opportunities.
Mm-hmm. There was another City 2. There was one more question about City 2. What player was it? Batachi.
Yeah.
What do you think about his outlook is for next year, Matt?
I think he's playing himself into a City contract. Wouldn't
I've been
surprise me.
saying I don't think he's ready for next year, maybe mid-season. He'll definitely get the Johnny Klein treatment at very least, right?
Yes.
Like give him
Yes.
the max amount of senior team loans in the season. I said the only thing holding him back was not scoring goals. Well, now he's done it. So I think he's forcing the question now. So
Yeah.
great question there, Chris Gebhardt. That was a good one.
And he's scoring from all different portions of the field, all different
Yep.
kinds of goals. He can receive the ball just outside the box, turn to face net, and just score. I mean, he can flick the ball in, he can strike from distance, he can move from a wing position inside very quickly. I think he plays off of Caden Glover quite well. And
Yes.
Johnny Klein, Caden Glover, Faisal Batachi are some of the most exciting attackers that you're gonna see for City 2, and they're consistent.
And even when Kazan comes in, like they all
Yeah.
seem very interchangeable and happy to play with each other. It looks like a fun attack with those guys up there. And I just want to say, like, this is like massive. If you're like a top to bottom St. Louis City fan, like academy to the senior team, right? Bottom academy to the senior team. When you see a player come in and you see them struggle or see them like not have something work of any kind, I love when I can critique something and then I can be like, whoop, that got fixed or something clicked in this player. Seeing it click in real time, watching a player figure it out. This is just the second year of City 2, and we've gotten to see this guy in less than one season struggle with something and figure it out in real time. Like, to me, that's why you stick it out. That's why you watch City 2. That's why you watch the academy. That's why you study these players who might disappear into nothing. But then again, maybe they don't, right? That's the fun. So for me, Batachi is the first player that I've seen struggle and figure it out. And now he's forcing the staff to ask questions about his time in the senior team next year. It's fun.
Yeah, and his backstory is cool too, coming from QPR. Like, he's one of those guys that Lutz pulled from a European league that he was not wasting away, but he was floundering and nobody really took a significant chance on him. And just like Michael Wenzel, those guys are now getting an opportunity to shine, a potential pathway to a first division team.
Yep. Yep. Glad you brought that up. That was a fun one to talk about. Anything else you want to talk about, Matt? I think we got time for like one or two more kind of topics here.
Yeah, I just looked up the UPSL roster, and Miggy Perez is not on that. So my thought that he might see time there. I don't know if even you can play for the UPSL if you have a pro contract. Now that I think about
Oh,
it,
I
he's not on
wonder.
that roster for the fall, and so whatever is going on, it does not seem to be related to that.
I didn't really say anything about Miggy. It's definitely not something to worry about. He might have even kind of hit his like physical demand for someone at his age for the season, and they're kind of taking it easy.
Could be.
Maybe not. So I think sometimes I've seen multiple 18-year-old and under players. I can't think of who I'm trying to think of right now. They kind of hit a wall like two-thirds or three-quarters of the way through the season, and he
Yeah.
hasn't looked as special toward the last couple starts, and as well as even as City 2 playing. He hasn't been bad by any means, but I mean, he's a kid and he's still figuring out what it's like to play in these leagues. Sometimes these guys like destroy in their first couple of appearances, and then something weird happens and they stop being quite as effective. Who knows? Who
Well,
cares? This is like a player for our future.
it is, and that's a really interesting thought because we know how much City is a stickler for the analytics and how data
Mm-hmm.
driven they are, and that would not surprise me in the slightest for Jared Phillips, the director of sports for performance, and for his staff to not put a minutes restriction on Miggy, but to just be evaluating his progressive fitness throughout the year and say the load that you've been under this year, we're tapering with a plan to unleash you in a new and different way next year. Like he's under contract now for a long-term contract, right? So he's a homegrown player. We want
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that he's long-term able to go. And he's already garnered the eyes of the youth national team. You know, there's projections of what he can do in the next few years. And so with the wear and tear that he's been under and the unexpected stress, I think, to his body this year, because I doubt anybody expected him to play the number of minutes that he's played,
Yeah.
especially at the level of MLS this year. And yet it happened. And
Yeah.
so they could be looking at this holistically as, you know, something that he needs to time away, or they're holding back and they'll unleash him here soon. Mark in chat said Perez commented on a post, "See you soon, St. Louis." And so
Mm-hmm.
could be back. It could be one of those things where there's a period of deloading and then you progressively load yourself back up. That could be all it is, and it's nothing to read too much into.
Absolutely not. Agree. Anything else, Matt? One more topic, or you feel like we've covered a lot today, and it's been really fun.
Yeah, there was a comment about Blome. No issues with Blome right now. The only thing with Blome that I've really been just trying to keep an eye on is the heat, because that's kind of the persistent thought about Jabulu Blome, and everybody's talking about his passing and his the way he moves on the ball. I think his defense, nothing's really dropped in the past few games, but it seems like he's been a little lacking on the ball,
Mm.
and I just wonder if it's more so the humidity and the minutes that relate to the consistent wear on his body that's related to. I don't know. I just am excited for a little cooler weather in general, and it wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
hurt on that front either.
Oh, today and yesterday. What? Oh, this is the good stuff, guys. We got to soak it in while we can in this
I don't
state.
care if it's false fall or not. I'll take it for however long it wants to last.
Oh, I bet hook, line, and sinker. If we get another 90-degree day, I'm gonna be so depressed. I know it. But that's Missouri life.
And the kids love it too. That's the thing. I was
Yeah.
at practice tonight. Like all the kids were much more active than they were last week. They were loving life a whole lot more than they were for that 98-degree weather.
Yeah. Oh man, Jonathan Himmelberg asking about men's national team. We were going to touch on it. That's why I wore the USA jersey. I don't think we have time to talk about that. Didn't they do a scrimmage or like some kind of training? Did Miggy take
So
part in that, or did I misread that?
so City was off training until Wednesday. Like
Okay.
in the schedule that they send out, they were off days on Monday and Tuesday. That's why I think the national team practicing those couple of days at City Park, I don't think there was an overlap. I didn't see pictures, I didn't see reports, nothing
Mhm.
about a combined training or any scrimmage between the national team and City. I think it was mostly, we're not using our facilities for these few days. You use them. We'll split time, but nothing cohesive. I do want to point out how cool it was for this week. Soccer capital conversation aside, because we don't have time for that, and I don't
Thank
want to get
you.
into that anymore.
Agree.
I think it was just cool how Greg Berhalter invited out all of the alumni, the local St. Louis alumni to the national team who've all had caps to show up, to take part in things, to just be there around the national team again, and just that familial experience that they all had. That was really cool for Berhalter to do, to invite all those players.
Mhm.
And so that's just been fun to watch this week.
Agree. I can't. It's destroying me. I can't make it to that game. It's my son's birthday party. I didn't do well there,
Oh,
so
that'll do it.
yeah, I'm gonna miss it.
The
But
national team scheduling didn't do well there. Come on.
I know. I mean, at least it's the first team. I would have loved to see the first team
Yeah.
play, no matter who the opponent is and when and how and stuff. But is what it is. I hope you guys are able to enjoy that game without me there. Enjoy it for me. And yeah, that's it. That's all we got for today. That's the wind down. Thanks for listening again. As always, thanks for the questions. Really great stuff
Yeah,
from
I
you guys
absolutely love it.
today.
Thank you guys so much for asking, because it true I don't care about tossing everything we wanted to talk about to the
Yeah,
side. These are
same.
great questions. Really appreciate it, and it brings me so much joy to be able to talk about them.
Agree. All right. Thanks again for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you next time. Bye bye.
See ya.